Okay, so welcome to this Legal Aid New South Wales Law webinar on anti-discrimination law in New South Wales, discrimination basics. My name is Kerry Wright and I work in the Community Legal Education branch at Legal Aid New South Wales. To begin, I want to acknowledge and pay my respects to the traditional owners and custodians on whose land we're broadcasting from today, and to extend that respect to any Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people joining the webinar today or viewing the recording. I'm with Claire Williams from Anti Discrimination New South Wales. Hi, Claire.
Hi.
So, Claire, can you tell us about your role at Anti Discrimination New South Wales?
Sure. It's been my pleasure to work with Anti Discrimination New South Wales for the past 15 years. And it's my role to engage as a community engagement officer, to engage with communities, so to work with people who are affected by our legislation and to provide free information and advice and referral advice about how people can use our service. So my job is varied, so I may go out to multicultural resource centres to work with the LGBTIQ. I work with students. I work with people with disabilities. So it's very broad, the sort of role that I play in educating the community about our organisation and how you can make a complaint.
Great, thank you. So the purpose of this webinar is to introduce our listeners to discrimination under the law in New South Wales and how to make a complaint and who can help. And the information today is general legal information only, not legal advice, but we will tell you where you can send your clients for specific legal advice. So the slide coming up now is covering the topics that we'll cover today. So what we're going to cover is what does Anti-Discrimination New South Wales do, discrimination laws, the types of unlawful discrimination in New South Wales, how to make a complaint of discrimination, COVID-19 discrimination, and how to make contact with Anti-Discrimination New South Wales. And what we'll do now is we'll start with a poll. So our first poll question is going to come up on the screen. So our first poll question is, have you helped a client with a discrimination complaint before, yes or no? So Claire, people are voting, and as soon as I've got most people voted, then I'll close that and share the results. Okay, I'll close that, share with you. Hopefully you can see that's come up. So 70% roughly have said no, about 30% have said yes, Claire.
Wow.
So
that's good. Yeah.
Yeah, so people have used the systems in place, so that's fantastic.
Yeah.
So I'll hide that poll now, and the next slide that's coming up is for you to tell us, Claire, what does Anti-Discrimination New South Wales do?
Yeah, so one of the things that we do a great deal of is we have an inquiry service that you can ring at any stage. Since COVID has has occurred, we have that inquiry. Those complaints are recorded, and we have people getting back to you within a couple of hours if you're making that complaint. Generally, we have people working on the lines between Monday and Friday, and I'll give you that information afterwards. So we answer inquiries about discrimination. So people can ring up confidentially and they don't have to provide their personal details when they make an inquiry. It's confidential. We also handle a complaint of discrimination if people choose to make a formal complaint. We as a community engagement team raise awareness about discrimination and its impacts. So we go out and do a lot of activities throughout New South Wales, whether they be information sessions or community stalls or community events, and we talk to people about our service and how they can utilise us. And we also are very interested in what people can tell us is happening in their community and to see if we can assist in some way. We manage applications for exemptions from the Act. So that is if, for example, somebody wants to put an ad in a paper and say they want to put for a female only or a male only. So an example would be, for example, the ABC saying a number of years ago, put in an application for an exemption to employ a female sports reporter, because at that stage there were not many female sports reporters on television. So people there have to apply for us for an exemption from the Act to therefore advertise and ask for a person of a specific sex to fulfil an employment role. We advise government about discrimination issues. So the government may approach us and say, have we worked with various communities and what is the feedback that we're getting from them about what's happening in the community? Or they may direct us to work with a certain community because of a current situation.
Okay, thank you. So we'll move on to our next slide. So what is discrimination, Claire?
Yeah, so discrimination is treating someone unfairly because of a characteristic they have or they're assumed to have that's protected under the New South Wales legislation. So that may be treating someone differently because of their race or their sex or their disability. There's a number of what we call grounds or reasons that people may treat somebody differently. And those grounds are just come up there. So these are the types of discrimination which are covered under the New South Wales legislation. So disability, which includes diseases and illnesses. Now, just for your information, COVID is covered under disability because it's not just a long-term disease or illness that disability covers. It also covers temporary illnesses, like short-term illnesses, as well as long-term illnesses. Sex discrimination, which includes pregnancy and breastfeeding. Race discrimination, so treating somebody differently because of their race. Age discrimination, so if somebody is too old, too young, or simply not the right age. And we receive a lot of complaints about age discrimination, particularly in employment. Marital or domestic status. So that's if you're married, you're single, you're de facto, or you're in a same-sex relationship. So you may be treated differently because of that, and that's what that ground covers. Homosexuality, so if you're gay or you're lesbian. Transgender status, so if you have had a sex change as a man to be a woman or a woman to be a man, or if you're simply living as the opposite gender, we cover people who are transgender who are discriminated against. Carers' responsibilities. Now, up till now, all those different grounds I've been talking about cover lots of different areas, but carers' responsibility is only covered in employment. And that is if that legislation covers the fact that your employer needs to be fair to you about your carers' responsibilities. So if you care for somebody who's a husband, a wife, a partner, a child, a grandparent, an aunt, if you're caring for somebody and you have specific needs, like, for example, to take them to hospital, or say your child has a disability, or your mother has cancer and you need to take them to hospital on certain days and so forth, and you request some assistance from your employer, and that assistance would be, look, I need to change my days, or I need to alter my work shifts this week, and your employer should be fair. Your employer doesn't have to agree to everything you ask for, but your employer has to be fair in negotiating with you about your requirements. And finally, just down there, we've got sexual harassment, and in those lists of the grounds of discrimination, disability, sexual harassment and race discrimination are the majority of the complaints that we receive every year. And the most of the sexual harassment complaints we get are from women, but we do get complaints from men, and obviously most of them are in the workplace.
Okay, Thanks very much, Claire. We're now going to launch another poll for everybody to participate. So this poll is asking, what types of discrimination do your clients experience? We've only got a few options up there, but you can choose more than one. There's disability, sex, race, age, or marital or domestic status. So I'll just let people vote for that. I also just want to let people know that on your control panel is a copy of the presentation as a handout. So if you want to download that and keep it for after the webinar, feel free to do that. That's on your control panel as a handout. Okay, most people seem to be voting, so I'll share those with you now, Claire. So you can see what's come up. 77% said disability, and then the next most popular is age, 46%. Oh no, race, sorry, 54%, and age 46,
Age,
and
yep.
then 23 for sex and marital or domestic status. So quite a variety there.
Yes, yeah, and it very much reflects our statistics in terms of our calls. And just for everybody's information who's here today, we're actually doing a major project with organisations. One of my colleagues, Morley Kamara, is working with disability organisations and consulting with them about our program and trying to ensure that we work better with organisations that support people with disabilities. So that's one of the major projects we're doing at the moment.
Okay, thank you. So we'll now move on, Claire, if you could talk to us about what anti-discrimination law covers in terms of areas.
Sure. So when most people think about discrimination, they often just think about workplaces, but it's important to say that discrimination legislation is covered in the following public places. So employment is listed there. So that's when you're at work or you're trying to get a job. Some people may feel that they're treated badly at work. A lot of people talk about trying to get a job and being treated badly. So, for example, race discrimination or sex discrimination in terms of trying to get a job, or even age discrimination. You can see their goods and services. So that's in shops, banks, using government services, cafes and hospitals. And it's important to say government services are included, because a lot of clients say, I can't make a complaint about, for example, police or a government body because they believe that they can't do that because they're government. That's not the case. You can make a complaint about any government service, including Anti Discrimination New South Wales. So the anti-discrimination law covers all those areas. Public education, so that's public schools, TAFEs and universities. Accommodation, now that's a big area we receive a number of complaints for, renting a house or a flat, particularly when people are trying to rent a house or a flat. We receive a lot of complaints about race discrimination when people are trying to get rental accommodation. Finally, we've got down there registered clubs. So that's any club that sells alcohol and or has gambling machines. And so the legislation covers those areas as well.
Great, thanks, Claire. So I'm going to launch another poll for our participants. So this poll is asking you, in what areas do these types of discrimination, the ones that you just highlighted for us, generally occur with your clients? Those, so in our previous poll, you were telling us what types of discrimination your clients generally experience. Now we want to know in what areas of life do they generally does this discrimination occur. So people are voting, Claire, and I'm just wait and get everyone's responses who wants to participate. And people can obviously also vote for more than one with this one as well. So I'll close that and share the results with you. So huge number there, employment.
Yes, very big there for employment.
And also accommodation, as you identified.
Yes. And education is
Public
huge.
education, that's interesting as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and then goods and services and registered clubs. So again, an interesting mix of...
we do receive, most of our complaints from are often employment matters, but we do receive a number of complaints about education as well. And obviously I mentioned accommodation before, So that very much reflects the sort of complaints we have coming in. That's interesting,
Okay. So I'll hide that poll, and Claire, the next slide coming up, you are going to tell us about how to make a formal complaint.
Yeah. So we, as an organisation, handle complaints of discrimination covered by the Anti Discrimination Act. But if you decide to make a complaint to us, we can help you and the other party find a way of resolving the complaint according to the law. Complaints need to be in writing. That doesn't have to be handwriting. That means that we need to receive a complaint as an email. If you decide, once you've made an inquiry to us on the inquiry line, or you have heard this information session today and you've decided you, for example, might want to make a complaint, or one of your clients wants to make a complaint, then we need you to email it to us. You can or write it to us. If you require assistance, please ring us, and I'll give you those details and we can try and assist you. You can lodge the complaint in any language. That's a really important point, and one that a lot of communities are surprised at. You can ring our inquiry line and speak your own language. You just have to ring the TIS service first. You can lodge a complaint in your own language. If you have any questions about the complaint process, you can contact our inquiry service, which I'll give you the details at the end of the session before making your complaint.
Okay. And this next slide coming up, can you want to tell us about your conciliation conferences?
Yeah, so we resolve a complaint of discrimination by using a method called conciliation, which is similar to mediation, and it's an opportunity for both parties to come to an agreement and to discuss the complaint and find a resolution if possible. This is a face-to-face meeting. Generally before COVID it was face-to-face meetings. I have to say it is still now online. It's online, and if people do not have an online facility, we use MS Teams to do our conciliations at the moment, then it is a telephone shuttling method. So it's a private face-to-face online meeting at the moment where both parties are able to have their say and have some control over how the complaint is resolved. Most important to say, our conciliation officers are impartial and they don't take sides. And the conciliation is just a way that the complaint can be resolved. But most people think, well, goodness, like why would somebody want to resolve it in that way? Well, it's often a good opportunity for both parties because it is confidential. It is a free service. You don't need a solicitor to use our service. And so it can go from, if it's not resolved with our service, it can go to a tribunal. So it's a really good way for something to be resolved at no cost to both clients and without using solicitors, and using experts in terms of our conciliators who actually fully understand the legislation.
And I did an interview with one of your conciliators recently, and we'll be releasing that interview on our podcast channel, Law for Community Workers on the Go. So that'll probably come out next week. So people can hear me speaking directly with one of your conciliation officers on that episode. So you want to tell us, Claire, now about possible outcomes from a conciliation?
Yes, that's important. And I suppose it's important to say that we tell clients when they're making a complaint with us to put in their complaint what will resolve this matter for them. So actually, when they formally lodge the complaint, to think about that. So it's a very important thing to think about, because sometimes people will say, oh, you know, that's an afterthought. But in making a complaint to us, what's going to resolve it for you? So the sorts of things that may resolve it for our clients who are making a complaint to us may be an apology or a statement of regret from the organisation or the individual that they feel discriminated against them. A job reinstatement, and you may want your job back, or the transfer or promotion that you were denied. Some people request financial compensation for lost wages, hurt and anxiety. It's important to say that compensation is not paid for by Anti Discrimination New South Wales. So whilst conciliation, the client may propose an amount that the organisation has to agree to, the organisation you're making the complaint about. So Anti Discrimination New South Wales simply conciliates that amount, the compensation. You may want access to a previously denied job opportunity or service. You may want, and sometimes this is requested, a workplace education and staff training. So, for example, just say that sexual harassment occurred in an organisation. One of the outcomes of a conciliation may be for all staff to be trained about sexual harassment and policies that are in place regarding that. Or you may want a change in policy at your organisation. So they're just examples of some of those outcomes, but each situation is different.
And Claire, do people get one or more of those outcomes? Does it matter if they want more than one?
Yeah, sure, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's good to know. So this slide coming up is what's happening in your community. So tell us about this survey that you've got on your website.
Yeah, well, I suppose a lot of community groups that we deal with don't feel confident to disclose information about discrimination. So we collect information about these incidences, and we want to be aware of emerging issues, but we're aware that some people don't want to disclose their identity and don't want to contact us. So therefore you can use this link, the SurveyMonkey link, and just let us know what's going on, and you don't have to give us any details. You can also ring our inquiry service and let us know if you want to speak to somebody online about it, but you may want to prefer to use the SurveyMonkey link.
Okay, and what sort of issues are people raising through that link? Have you had much response?
Yes, people are often raising issues about COVID, and there's a lot of community groups. For example, I recently did a session last week, was talking to a Chinese community, Sydney-based Chinese community, and they were commenting how their community, that they felt that this Sydney-based community would not make complaints because they were fearful of retribution or losing their jobs or losing their access to services. So often people will use that link to let us know about things that are going on. Particularly, we received quite a few comments about COVID through that survey.
Oh, well, that's a good segue. Now we're going to talk about examples of unlawful discrimination relating to COVID-19 that you've seen. Do you want to take us through those?
Yeah, so examples of unlawful discrimination are, for example, if your employment is terminated because you have COVID-19 or someone in your family has COVID-19. So these are the sorts of complaints we've been receiving. Your employer has downsized because of COVID-19, and with the changes being rolled out in your workplace, you're treated differently to your colleagues on the basis of your pregnancy or your carer's responsibility. So therefore, you lose your job or you get worse conditions because of COVID-19. Your rental agreement, it may be terminated because you're a doctor, nurse or health worker and the landlord's worried that you were infected with COVID-19 and you'll contaminate the property. So these are the sorts of information that people are telling us of what's happened over COVID-19. This is one of the most common. You're abused in public because of your race. Now, I did a lot of work with Asian communities during COVID, and this was quite common. And when we don't know the identity of someone, it's obviously very difficult to make a complaint to us. So we reached out to the police and we did some work with New South Wales Police about using CCTV cameras. So in terms of race discrimination, we're talking about your colour, your nationality, descent, ethnic or ethno-religious background. You may be denied a service in a shop because of your race. So we heard of people who are of Asian background being asked to leave shops. You have a responsibility to follow the laws and restrictions that are in place. So we did receive a lot of complaints that people, for example, didn't want to wear masks or didn't want to follow some COVID rules. But when you're in a pandemic and there are rules regarding sort of behaviours such as masks wearing, it's not discrimination. And obviously, if you had a health condition, you would carry a doctor's certificate regarding that. But all that information surrounding that was on the New South Wales Health website. You also have a responsibility not to discriminate against anyone or treat them unfairly because of their race, because you think they have COVID-19 or for any other characteristic that's protected under the legislation.
Okay. Thanks, Claire. So I'm just going to launch another poll for our participants. So this one is asking, have your clients experienced discrimination since the COVID-19 restrictions began? So in particular, more discrimination, I guess, than you think that they would have experienced before or related to COVID-19, with examples that Claire has given us. So I'm just letting people vote on that. And then I'll share that for people once people have told us what they think. Okay, so I'll close that now and share the results with you, Claire. It's coming up. So there were some. So 23% said yes and 77% said no. So it's, I guess, like you said, there has been an increase. So obviously some of our participants have seen that as well. Okay. So what we're going to do now, I'll hide that result and I'll bring up our next slide. So we're going to do a little case study with you. And this case study is about Ahmed, who works at the local aged care facility, Happy Village Aged Care in Sydney. He's been working there for 2 years and Annie started working at the facility 3 months ago. Ahmed and Annie's manager, Shona, is going on maternity leave. Ahmed and Annie both applied for the maternity leave position, but Annie got the job. Ahmed thinks this is race discrimination. So what I'm going to do is share a poll with you, our participants, and you can tell us, do you think Ahmed has experienced race discrimination? Yes, no, I don't know, but I think it's some form of discrimination. So I'll let our participants vote on that poll before we move forward on our webinar. This is our last poll for this webinar. Okay, so people are voting, which is great. And then I'll let you talk us through this case study, Claire. So I'll just close that and share the results. A few people said yes. A few more people said no, and 60% said I don't know, but I think it's some form of discrimination. So Claire, do you want to, I'll hide that so we can bring the slide back up. What do you want to tell us? Is this race discrimination?
Sure. So it's quite, as you can see, it's quite a generic case study. So it's very difficult. You'd have to know more information. So you can't blanketly look at that. As you can tell by the results of the survey, you can't blanketly look at that and say it's definitely 100% race discrimination, because, I mean, obviously Ahmed's worked at the local aged care facility. Shona's going on maternity leave. Annie may have had more skills. She may have, even though she's worked there a shorter amount of time, she may have more skills and she may have worked there for a longer period of time. So we would be asking Ahmed when he rang the inquiry line that information. If he made a formal complaint to us, we'd be saying, how long have you worked there? What's the, do you know any thing about Annie's qualifications and so forth? So there's no clear answer. So Ahmed may say to us, there's no clear answer when you just look at this case study. But if Ahmed said to us, look, you know, she's just started and she doesn't have the same qualifications that I have, it may very well be race discrimination. But if he was to say to us, yep, she's got an extensive amount of experience and she's worked in a huge number of places, then she may have been selected for her qualifications. And that's what the inquiry service and the conciliation would hopefully gel out of the situation.
Okay, thank you. So as there was a mixture of responses, it does really depend on Ahmed providing more information about the situation.
Yeah. So if Ahmed was just to provide more information, and if it went to a conciliation, we would also ask the organisation to respond and to provide some information about, you know, why they selected the other candidate.
And being transparent. So this next slide's come up, Claire. So I've been treated unfairly. What can I do?
Yeah, so this is just about step by step explaining how you can make a complaint or an inquiry to our service.
Okay. Here's our next slide.
So if you decide to make an inquiry, you can phone us, AD New South Wales, and make a confidential inquiry about a complaint or a discrimination matter. Your call goes to an inquiry officer. First of all, it will go to a recording service at the moment because of COVID. We're about to go live again. Our calls used to come in live, but at the moment it's a recording service, but someone will get back to you. It's confidential, free and impartial advice. We also provide referrals if you're ringing us about a matter that doesn't fit under our legislation. As community workers, you can, from representative bodies, you can assist in someone making a complaint or lodge a complaint on someone else's behalf, but they have to give you permission for you to do that. The other party, so the organisation you're complaining about, we call the respondent, they do have to know who you are when you make a complaint to us. So we will ask them to respond to your complaint.
Okay. And this next slide.
So if you decide to write to us, you can, or to email us. We do need to know the contact details of the person or organisation that you're complaining about. So we ask clients when they often ring us or when I do community information sessions, keep a diary, write down as much information as possible. So what happened? What were the dates and times? Do you have any names? What were the full names of people involved, if you have them? Were there witness details? There don't have to have witnesses to make a complaint. That's important to say. You don't have to have a witness. But if you do, please include their details. And how you would like the complaint to be resolved. Now, to assist you online on our internet website, we have a complaint form with boxes that you can simply just fill in. However, that is in English. So with clients that have English as a second language, we explain to them they can just use the information in the session the education session we provide them as a guide, and that they can write the complaint in their own language or email it in their own language. Once you make a complaint to us, the people that you're complaining about, the agency you're making a complaint about, called the respondent, they're entitled to reply to the complaint. So once they have replied to the complaint, it's our role to get both parties together, so yourself and the person that you're complaining about, or the agency. Now, a lot of clients are worried that if we bring people together for a conciliation conference, we're going to bring the bully. We don't bring the person that was the bully in the office, in the workspace, or the bully at school or TAFE. We actually bring a representative, a HR representative from the organisation that's linked to the complaint. So if you are making a complaint about work, it would be the HR department that would be coming to the conciliation, which I mentioned they're still online. So our conciliations are on MS Teams or they're through telephone shuttling. It's a free service, and our conciliators, services are provided for free. But it's important to say we remain neutral and attempt to resolve the matter as best as we can for both parties. So we're not going to advise you to go ahead and make a complaint. We're not going to advise you what you should ask for example, compensation or any of those matters, because we need to remain neutral in the attempt to resolve the matter. On average, our complaint service takes from the minute your complaint is accepted to completion, on average, it's 4 months. But if there is an urgency linked to your complaint, for example, if there's aggression or violence, or we are able to fast track complaints.
Okay. And Claire, what happens if the respondent, the other party, doesn't want to come to the conciliation?
Yeah. If they don't want to come to the conciliation, then it can be taken to the next step, which would be the tribunal. So we can advise those parties. We can. Some people don't necessarily have to do conciliation. They can choose just to go to the tribunal. However, most parties do decide to come to the conciliation because, as I mentioned before, it's a free service and it's confidential, and you don't need a solicitor, so it's no cost. So if it isn't resolved to us, it can go to the tribunal. So that is whether it wasn't resolved in the conciliation or somebody decided, one party decided they didn't want to participate. It can be moved on to the tribunal, which is called NCAT, which is the New South Wales Civil and Administrative Tribunal. So you can request the President of Anti Discrimination New South Wales to send your complaint there. It's like a court. Its hearings are public and its decisions are legally binding and no longer confidential. So you will read in the newspaper often about complaints that may have gone to NCAT. But if a complaint is resolved in conciliation, it's confidential. But NCAT's complaints are public. Solicitors are normally used, and so therefore you pay your own legal costs, but you may be able to talk to a lawyer at legal aid about your options with regard to that, to get access to a pro bono lawyer, or get some assistance with your legal needs.
And the phone number's there for Law Access New South Wales on the slide, 1300 888 529, and that is the way that you get in touch with Legal Aid New South Wales. You phone Law Access New South Wales and they do a triage about what is your legal problem, and then they make the relevant referrals to Legal Aid New South Wales if it's a discrimination complaint. Okay, so Claire, what have we got next? Oh, how to get in touch with you.
Yeah, so it's important that you see that we have our inquiry line there, the 9268 5544. So you can ring and let us know that you want to speak to an inquiry officer and they'll call you back. There's also the toll-free number there. You can also see that you can email us. I've also included my contact details and my email, because one of the things I do is I do free community education sessions, and you may want to contact me about an information session for your community group, whether that's online or face-to-face. I do travel around New South Wales as well. If you do decide to make a formal complaint to us, you can email that complaint to us at complaints@adb@justicenewsouthwales.gov.au. And there's our website as well as our website. So I encourage you to go and have a look at our Anti Discrimination New South Wales on our website. There are links to community languages. There are links to all the grounds and areas of the law. And there is also a link to a complaint form. And I know you're going to be sent after this forum some more information and links to access some more information regarding Anti Discrimination New South Wales.
That's right, lots of links to different pages on your website. Okay, well, I think that brings us to the end of our webinar. Thanks so much, Claire. So I'll just say thank you to you, but if people want to type in any questions, I haven't had any questions so far from anyone, but we'll keep it open for a little bit, and let you put in your
Hmm.
questions. I'll
Yeah.
go back to that slide with your contact details in case people were writing those down as well. And if people are
And
listening,
while
yes.
people are typing questions, I just wanted to thank everybody for who's chosen to jump online today. And it's been a pleasure to explain the Anti-Discrimination New South Wales to you. And also thank you to Kerry, who's been so helpful in working with us in doing the webinar and the podcast. And we're really grateful to Legal Aid for giving us this opportunity.
Yeah, no, we love having all our special guests on our webinars so that community workers can know better about how to support their clients and refer people for different legal matters. And as I said, I've done an interview recently with one of the conciliation counsellors, so that'll be coming out soon on our podcast. I've got a question here, Claire. When you're working for an organisation, isn't a complaint supposed to be resolved within the organisation?
That's a really good point. When you're working for an organisation will have grievance procedures often in place. Some organisations, unfortunately, don't, but most organisations should have policies and procedures regarding how to resolve a grievance. Some people, for example, if sexual harassment occurs in a workplace, may not feel comfortable making a complaint internally, or some people may have made a complaint internally and they have may have received an inadequate response. So, for example, when I've been on the inquiry line before, I've had a young woman ring me and say, well, sexual harassment occurred at her work. She made a complaint internally. She talked to her manager. It went to HR. Her manager said to her, I don't think you should make this complaint because you're going to ruin that man's life. So that was an inadequate response and it wasn't documented appropriately. So she chose to make a complaint to us. So I suppose the full answer to your question is you can choose. Obviously, if you have a complaint with a shop or in an office or at TAFE or school, you can choose to try and resolve that with the organisation you work with. Or the organisation you've had access to. You can ask them for their grievance procedures. You can attempt to resolve that if you feel comfortable. But you don't have to. You can come straight to us, or you can simply try first and then come to us if it's not resolved appropriately. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. And I guess if people rang your complaints line, they may ask that question as well. Have you tried to resolve this internally?
For sure.
Yeah. So the next question I've got is, how should a person decide whether to make a complaint to the Anti Discrimination Board of New South Wales or to the Australian Human Rights Commission?
Yeah, that's a really good question as well. My advice to clients is always ring both. The big difference between our organisations is if you make a complaint to Anti Discrimination New South Wales, what has happened to you has to have occurred in the last 12 months. So if you make a complaint to our service, what has happened to you has to have happened in the last 12 months. If, for example, something happened to you 2 or 3 years ago and you didn't know about our service and you weren't aware that you could make a complaint, please still make a complaint to us and explain why it's taken you the length of time to do so. If you need to make a complaint to Australian Human Rights, their window is 6 months, slight difference. But I would suggest to clients and community members to bring up both services and get advice from both and then decide which way you want to do it.
And I think Anti Discrimination New South Wales, you cover some areas that the human rights
absolutely
doesn't cover.
That's a really good point as well. We don't cover things like political opinion and religion. We don't cover bisexuality. But both of our services, our inquiry officers are equipped to be able to, if somebody was to ring us and say, for example, I want to make a complaint, I've been treated unfairly and I'm bisexual, we would refer you to Australian Human Rights Commission, or I've been affected because of my time in prison. That would be another issue that we would refer someone to Australian Human Rights. So we're very good at referring clients to each other based on the information we hear on inquiry.
Okay. Well, that's great. And I think if someone was talking to a Legal Aid New South Wales lawyer about a discrimination complaint, they'd talk about the two options as well to help them make a decision. So the next question I've got here is, are you obliged to tell the organisation you will use legal aid because the organisation did not help? I think what they mean is the Anti Discrimination New South Wales. Do they have to tell the organisation, or is that something that you manage?
So if you decide to make a complaint to our organisation and you make a formal complaint, you don't have to tell the organisation yourself, but we will be contacting the organisation and saying, please respond to this matter that has come to our attention. So we will write to them formally, and then we will request information, and they have a time period that they've got to respond to us within. So so they will end up finding out whether you tell them or we tell them. But you don't have to let them know if you don't feel comfortable.
Okay, thank you. The next question is actually for me because I've talked about our podcast. So the podcast that the Legal Aid New South Wales Community Legal Education team have is called Law for Community Workers on the Go. It's hosted on Podbean, and there's a link on our website. If you go to Legal Aid New South Wales website homepage, you'll see in the top right-hand corner a link to Podbean, and that's where you'll find all our episodes. I haven't loaded that one up yet. It'll hopefully go up next week, but there's plenty of other episodes of us talking to different people about legal topics, including our most recent one, which is about hard conversations and elder abuse. So keep an eye on that or subscribe, and then you'll get it whenever we release a new episode. So I'm just seeing, it doesn't look like we've got any more questions coming through from our listeners. Here we go. If someone is out of time, makes an out-of-time complaint but has an adequate excuse, can it still be conciliated or taken to NCAT, Claire?
Yep, yeah, so absolutely. So if your matter is out of time, if it's over 12 months for us or over 6 months for Australian Human Rights, please still contact us. And if you just talk to one of our inquiry officers, and if you decide to make a complaint, to us, that will be looked at. We'll look at, so people may have been stressed or anxious or may have not known that the service existed, and therefore that's why it's taken so much time, and that will be looked at. So our president looks at matters like that, and she makes our president is Annabelle Bennett, and she makes those decisions about complaints that are out of time, and they're often accepted.
Okay, great. And the same with NCAT. What happens there? Do you know?
So look, it can, if it's referred from us as a conciliation matter, then therefore going to NCAT. So if it goes through us, if you know, that would be how it would work. So if it went through us as the Anti Discrimination New South Wales, or if it went through the Australian Human Rights, obviously is a federal agency, so it uses a federal court. It doesn't use a state legislation. So our legislation is state, and we use the tribunal. And yes, you would first step go through us, and if that was accepted, if it was out of time, and then it could go through to the tribunal. Yeah.
Okay. Now, someone's asked the question, are complaints logged? I'm not really sure what that means.
If you asked, so they're confidential. So if our complaints are confidential, so that you can't have access. So people often ask about their work employment record. So it should not be kept on your employment record, and they're confidential, so nobody has access to them. And it can be, so if you were to move on to another job, there would be no evidence that you had made a previous complaint. Work health and safety is different. That's on your record, often if there's an injury, but there is no, it's a confidential matter, the anti-discrimination.
Okay, and unlike if you go to a tribunal or a court, it's not published in any place.
No. Well, if it does go to the tribunal, it's a public matter. But a complaint to our service, Anti Discrimination New South Wales, that's conciliated with us, is a confidential. If it goes to NCAT, then it becomes public, and it does have like a complaint number, and it is sort of logged in the system of NCAT complaints. But it still shouldn't go on your work record in terms of you having formally made a complaint of discrimination.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, I think that's all of our questions that we've had from our participants. So thank you, everyone, for your time today. And thank you again, Claire. We really appreciate your time today and sharing the information about the work of Anti Discrimination New South Wales. Just a reminder about two things. After I close the webinar, you'll get a survey, and we appreciate your feedback. And you'll also get an email in about an hour which has links to all the resources that Claire's talked about today. You can see our email address for the Community Legal Education team at Legal Aid New South Wales on the screen, cle@legalaid.newsouthwales.gov.au. If you're watching this webinar as a recording, you can send us an email and we'll get those questions put to Claire, because we'll stay in touch. So we look forward to your attendance at the next Law for Community Workers webinar, and we'll say goodbye for now. People are just saying thank you.
And, thank you so much.
Yeah, so thank you, Claire, and we'll see
Pleasure.
you at the next one. Okay.
Fabulous. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.